Hello, YouTube. As you ponder current food situation, overpopulation, and the price of the food, I want to tell you about very interesting projects that existed in the Soviet Union and preceded what is happening today in the West. Very interesting stuff and virtually unknown in the West. So I'm talking about the projects of Soviet academician Alexander Nesmiyanov. It was about the production of artificial food, and they were long ahead of his time. Bold ideas and developments of the Russian scientists are being adopted only now, when more than half a century has passed since the implementation of the inventor's first large-scale project for the synthesis of protein granular caviar from skimmed milk. This could only come to a mind of a vegetarian, as they say. The inventor of artificial black caviar and oil yeast at one time was greatly influenced by the picture of famine in the USSR in the 1920s. You see, Nesmiyanov was a member of the so-called food detachments. They were armed groups that the socialist government sent to forcefully take food away from peasants. And they traveled to villages and smaller settlements to seize grain from peasants. And he saw enough of everything, including cases of cannibalism, to which the villagers, distraught from malnutrition, were forced to, basically. My grandfather, by the way, also saw people dying from artificially created collectivist hunger in Ukraine in the 1930s. And of course, we had cannibalism in Kiev and other areas too, not only Ukraine, in other parts of the Soviet Union too. And this, I just want to let you know so you understand. This is not only limited to Russia, Ukraine, and territories around. Trust me. The same would happen in the West if some people who want to gain control and force collectivist policies will do so. The only difference between them and, for example, North Korean regime is the opportunity, and they do not have it. Anyway, shocked by what he saw, he vowed to do everything possible to solve the food problem, not only in the Soviet Union, but also beyond its borders. The chemist, scientist who had been a committed vegetarian since childhood was lucky to survive during the times of the Great Terror. This is the policies of the Soviet communist government under Stalin. He actually lost his brother, who was executed in 1941 under charges of espionage. The winner of the Stalin and later Lenin prizes, the future twice hero of socialist labor, Nesmiyanov, by the early 1950s, became quite an authoritative organic chemist. From 1948 to 1951, he was senior official at the Moscow State University. And since 1951, he was the president of the USSR Academy of Sciences. Imagine that. This was no ordinary person. He was a committed, real scientist. And he had all the background necessary. So Nesmiyanov's idea of creating food from hydrocarbons and setting up its industrial production did not gain favor of the agrarian Khrushchev, who was the leader of the Soviet Union after Stalin. Not immediately, but he became one, if you know history, and his rise and his downfall. Nikita Sergeyevich Khrushchev fundamentally disagreed with the fact that this project could become a real alternative to agriculture, which was recovering with great difficulty and at a slow pace after the Great Patriotic War, or World War II, as it is known in the Soviet Union. After 10 years of presidency, Nesmiyanov resigned as head of the USSR Academy of Sciences. I don't think he had a choice. Despite the non-recognition by the official authorities of the usefulness of development in the manufacture of artificial food products, this activity had has continued since the mid-1950s under the leadership of Nesmiyanov in the chemical and biological institutes of the country. The main task was to obtain food protein from the raw materials of non-animal origin. The vegetarian Nesmiyanov did not want to kill animals for these purposes. In the early 1960s, the chemist at the Institute of Organoelement Compounds of the USSR Academy of Sciences developed and mastered an industrial method by which protein granular caviar, an analog of a similar sturgeon product, if you ever tried it, I think you would like it, was made. It was made using the protein of skimmed milk, a waste product of milk production, as a basis. In parallel, work was carried out on the cultivation of yeast from petroleum hydrocarbons, followed by the production of food protein from this substance. As the chemist's contemporaries recall, the taste of synthetic products did not matter to Nesmiyanov. He believed that salt, sugar, food acid, caffeine, or quinine could then create it. The scientist's assistants somehow made pasta from the chemically obtained protein. The head of the experiment tried and found the product quite edible. After the pasta, it was the turn of the grainy caviar. Nesmiyanov was obsessed with the idea of feeding the country with chemical food, persistently proved its numerous advantages in scientific papers, talked about the prospects of industrial production of synthetic food. Already in the 1960s, he called for actively extracting food protein from non-agricultural plant crops. These ideas began to seriously interest scientists only now in modern time, in the 21st century, for those who listen to my video in the future centuries. The scientists claimed that yeast, meat, butter, cheese obtained from oil are much cheaper than natural analogs. Nesmiyanov's ideas seemed utopian and therefore were not taken seriously by the Soviet authorities. Moreover, the scientists reasoned apolitically. According to the logic of a chemist, if you start developing industrial production of petroleum protein, but most of the plowing, sowing, and harvesting village workers need to be deprived of their work. With this approach, agricultural products will not be needed. Nesmiyanov took the liberty to decide for the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union how to eliminate the food problem in the USSR. The chemist's proposals were not approved by the authorities, and the scientists' experiments remained at the level of laboratory experiments. The return to the topic of creating synthetic products is happening now, after more than half a century since the beginning of experimental development by Nesmiyanov. Artificial meat in the Western countries, for example, is trying to be made on the basis of animal stem cells. Chicken, so to say, is being made on the basis of plant proteins. Many scientists believe that due to the overpopulation of our planet, the topic of creating artificial food will become especially relevant. Sooner or later, there'll come a time when natural products will simply not be enough to feed the multi-billion-dollar consuming and numbering humanity. I want to add something too. Of course, you don't have much choice, and by you, I'm also on this planet, so I should say we. It's either going to be eating insects in food or bug hamburgers, or maybe artificially created food like Nesmiyanov was doing. But since I was a young boy, I've been reading about the exploration of the ocean, and I've seen a few things. And I think there are products in the ocean, not only seaweeds, that could be used for our food consumption, and also not just fish. But it will take scientists, real scientists, to get into this and discover. There was even a science fiction story that we read in the Soviet Union about the underwater fields where vegetation was grown for human consumption. I think if the ocean, if we don't suffocate it, if we don't destroy it by our waste products, may help us. And we'll keep that in mind. But this is the story that I wanted to let you know at the episode in the history of the USSR. Yeah, we had quite a lot of bright scientists. It's the government, it's the socialist government that was not very bright. And I will bring you more interesting stories about such episodes. It's very important. I think there will be problems with overpopulation, maybe not as extreme as being described by our media, which likes to panic a lot, but something will take place. So we have to think of how to fight it. Thank you for your attention to my work. If you can support my research, please do so through the links in the description. You will find in the description to this video by PayPal and other means. And please tell others about my channel. And please like my videos. Thank you.